Imagine the world suddenly gets wrecked. Nobody knows how it happened. But amidst the chaos, a man named Will is desperately searching for his pregnant wife. That's essentially the premise for Will, who has just barely made it back to his city, now in ruins. Ash falls everywhere and empty cars litter the streets. Thinking quickly, Will grabs a gas mask from a fire truck. As he navigates the devastated city, he sees dead bodies in cars and smoke rising from many buildings. He finally reaches their apartment building, climbs the fire escape, and enters through a window, only to find half the building has collapsed. On a wall, Samantha has left him a message indicating her location. With this newfound hope, he gets back in his car and sets off to find his wife again. Will begins to recall how, just a few days prior, everything was perfect. He was at the hospital with his girlfriend Samantha, where they received the joyful news that they were expecting a son. Shortly after, Will departed for the airport, but not before telling Samantha he intended to ask her father for her hand in marriage. Upon arriving in Chicago, Will first attended all his business meetings before heading to the home of Samantha's parents, Paula and Tom. The atmosphere in the house was quite tense. During dinner, Tom directly questioned Will about his intentions with his daughter. He also inquired if Will would assert any claim to the money they would give Samantha should their relationship ever end. Will responded that he earns good money and was not marrying her for financial gain, emphasizing that she was the love of his life. However, for reasons unknown, Tom seemed to disbelieve everything Will said. An argument ensued between them. Paula attempted to intervene and stop the dispute, but the situation only worsened. Ultimately, Paula asked Will to leave, stating it was late. The following morning, Will was awakened by a video call from Samantha. Checking his phone, he realized he was late for his return flight. Samantha had called to inquire about his meeting with her father the previous night. Suddenly, the power at her location went out. Samantha noted that it felt strange, with odd noises during the call and her phone screen acting erratically before the call abruptly disconnected. Will repeatedly tried to call her back, but no one answered. When he arrived at the airport, he discovered all flights had been canceled. News reports indicated a severe earthquake near California. Shortly thereafter, news signals ceased and the entire airport lost power. Without hesitation, Will decided to take a taxi, and the driver agreed after he offered extra money. The taxi drove directly to Samantha's parents' house. Will explained the entire situation to Paula and Tom. Fighter jets were visible in the sky through the window. Tom decided he would go find Samantha, while Paula would go to their son's house. Will and Tom set out together to locate Samantha. The road was heavily congested with traffic. GPS and network services were completely down, and people were looting supermarkets to secure supplies in anticipation of the emergency. They stopped at a gas station where Will was filling up the car while Tom went inside to pack some items for the journey. Suddenly, some individuals began to accost Will, attempting to seize his car. When the situation escalated, Tom intervened, offering to pay them. However, instead of money, he produced a gun and scared them away. Further down the highway, they encountered an army checkpoint. Tom spoke to the soldiers, explaining that his daughter was stranded and he didn't know if she was safe. Hearing a father's desperate plea, the soldiers agreed and granted them permission to proceed. Along the way, they observed numerous army trains heading west, which led them to deduce that the situation was indeed very dire. That night, a police officer stopped their car. Tom immediately realized this was not a genuine officer, but merely an ordinary individual who had stolen a police vehicle. When the man drew a gun, Tom quickly reversed the car and managed to escape. However, the man began to pursue them. Tom handed Will the gun, and Will attempted to fire it but couldn't figure out how to unlock it. While driving, Tom instructed him on what to do, and Will eventually fired a shot. This pursuit continued for a while until Tom maneuvered the car in such a way that the fake police car crashed. A little further, they noticed some deer in the road. Tom swerved to avoid them, and soon their own car also crashed. At this point, the fake police officer had caught up to them again and began threatening Will. However, Tom attacked him from behind, rendering him unconscious. Tom had sustained significant injuries to his ribs. Soon after, they utilized the fake police officer's car to extricate their own vehicle. The following day, they arrived at a trailer park where the residents were distrustful of them. However, they met Ricky in a garage. Ricky observed their worn condition and agreed to repair their car. The radio reported that only shortwave signals were operational. There had been no official response from the government regarding the events that transpired. No one knew what was happening or why. Birds were flying in extremely unusual patterns. It was clear that something very wrong was about about to occur. When Tom went to the restroom, he saw his injury had worsened. Ricky informed them that the car was only temporarily fixed and could break down at any time, urging them not to blame her later. When Tom heard that Ricky was planning to go to California, he offered her a deal. Tom proposed to pay her to accompany them, stating it would bring her closer to her destination, and in return, she would fix their car whenever it broke down. After some consideration, Ricky agreed, but requested a significantly higher payment. They then loaded all of Ricky's tools into the car and swiftly departed. In the evening, they noticed a car following them. They immediately pulled over and turned off their lights. They waited silently until the other car passed them. Then, using their taillights as a guide, they began to follow that car. A short while later, Ricky checked her compass, and its needle was spinning rapidly, suggesting unusual changes in the Earth's magnetic field. Suddenly, another car approached rapidly from the side of the road. Will narrowly managed to avoid it. The new car collided with the car they were following, and both vehicles veered off the road. Will checked the first car, but no one had survived. Ricky inspected the second car, finding a deceased woman, but her husband was still alive and attempting to speak. He couldn't vocalize. When Ricky suggested they take him to the hospital, Tom flatly refused, stating the hospital was too far and he would die en route. Tom and Will returned to the car, but Ricky remained outside, intently observing the bodies as if trying to comprehend something. Then another car stopped and some strange-looking men emerged from it. Tom became alert. He accelerated the car to distance themselves, but Will urged him to pick up Ricky first. Tom then quickly brought Ricky inside and drove off. Tom revealed that if Will hadn't insisted, he wouldn't have picked Ricky up. Ricky was very displeased that they had almost left her behind and declared she would no longer fix the car. Tom then jolted the car slightly, causing Ricky's face to hit the front seat. A while later, when they stopped for gas, Ricky and Will noticed some unusual clouds. These suggested something was amiss. Suddenly, lightning struck a nearby pole and a violent storm erupted. This sudden turn of events made them quite uneasy. Tom now found it very difficult to drive. Even with the car's lights on, the road was barely visible. So they decided to take shelter under a bridge until the rain subsided. The next morning, the weather was clear and their journey resumed. As they passed a radio tower, the car picked up a radio signal. The reporter stated that internet service was unavailable anywhere. Mobile phones were out of network, and despite numerous attempts, no news had been received from the government. They soon reached the outskirts of a town where people had blocked the road with their cars. The sheriff observed them closely and refused them entry. However, when Will mentioned he knew some people there and provided their names to the sheriff, he agreed to let them pass. Will soon arrived at the home of his old friend, Meg. Meg was extremely distressed, explaining that she couldn't reach her husband, who had been on a business trip when all this occurred. Will seized the opportunity to shower. Ricky performed maintenance on the car, and Tom refilled water bottles. Meg continuously cried, missing her husband. Will consoled her, assuring her that everything would be all right, but he couldn't stay with her for long. Afterward, they resumed their journey. A short distance away, they saw a large amount of smoke. A military airplane had crashed there. Everyone assumed that someone had attacked the country. A little later, they arrived at a water park and began searching for useful items. Ricky jumped into the pool for a swim, but the water was very hot. Just then, a military helicopter flew by. They then quietly began searching for items in their surroundings, but upon seeing the condition of the place, all three concluded that people had already taken everything. The cash register was empty, and all car tires had been slashed, though gasoline cans could still be filled. Tom couldn't lift much due to his injury, so Will took on the responsibility. That night, as they drove past an antenna, their phones suddenly began to receive notifications. Tom's phone received messages from Samantha, where she expressed her love for him via voicemail. However, the messages contained more static interference than Samantha's voice and abruptly cut off. Tom also attempted to call his wife, Paula, but there was no signal. Then they noticed a line of people on the road, coughing severely. Smoke was rising in the distance, and as they approached, the sight before them horrified them. The entire area was ablaze. Ricky, in fear, suggested they turn back. However, Will stated they had no other option and accelerated the car to full speed. After driving for some time, a woman appealing for help appeared before them. Her car with a flat tire was on the side of the road. Ricky and Will felt compassion for her and wanted to assist, but suddenly, several armed men emerged. It became clear that the woman had been forced to lie and lure people into a trap. The men were attempting to steal their gasoline. Will tried to fight one of the men, but he was easily knocked down. Tom tried to retrieve his gun, but fell due to the pain from his broken ribs. The men then forcibly ordered Ricky to fill their tanks bikes and fled with the remaining gasoline cans. The three got back into the car, and Will asked the woman to join them. However, she chose to stay with her unconscious husband. Following this, a car chase ensued amidst heavy smoke. The other group began firing, so Will slammed his car into theirs. Tom was constantly coughing and unable to operate the gun, so he handed it to Ricky and told her to shoot. Ricky missed a few shots, but then she hit their tire, blowing it out and causing their car to flip over. Ricky quickly tried to retrieve the gasoline cans, but one of the men held onto them. Ricky managed to get one can back, but then Will noticed gasoline leaking from their car, indicating a potential explosion at any moment. Therefore, he urged Ricky to flee. Fortunately, they were quite far away when their car exploded. A little while later, Ricky told Will to stop the car, and she got out. She felt terrible about killing the people who died in the car crash. She believed that if she hadn't shot, their car wouldn't have crashed and they wouldn't have lost their lives. However, Tom and Will explained that she had also saved their lives, arguing that if they hadn't killed them, those men would have killed them as they were firing at them. Ricky requested to be left alone for a while, and Will complied. Soon the sun began to rise, but Ricky had not yet returned. Will called her name but received no answer. Many of their belongings were also missing. Tom then began to say that they should never have brought Ricky with them. After waiting a short while, they continued their journey. Suddenly, Tom began coughing up blood. Following this, they stopped at a crash site where several cars and a train were present. Will intended to find some gasoline there. When Will returned, he saw that Tom was struggling to breathe. Will quickly inserted a needle into Tom's chest to release some pressure, which helped Tom breathe more easily. Soon, they resumed their journey, and Tom made Will promise that he would take care of his daughter Samantha. They shared old memories of their lives, and Tom finally acknowledged that Will was genuinely a good person. He knew Samantha was pregnant, and he was now convinced that Will would be a good father. In the evening, as they were crossing a bridge, they observed numerous empty cars. Then some armed men blocked their path. Will pleaded with them to move, explaining he was taking his friend to the hospital. However, the men refused to let Will pass. Will realized that if he stopped there, he would be in serious trouble. He quickly reversed the car, and two men on motorcycles began to pursue him. But Will maneuvered the car in such a way that both bikers crashed. He could now move forward, but a truck was blocking their way. Tom, with great difficulty, fired shots, and simultaneously Will swerved the car, causing the truck driver to lose control and crash to the side. Finally, they crossed the bridge and continued onward. However, Tom could no longer endure the pain and passed away in the back seat of the car. A short while later, Will stopped the car, looked at Tom's body, and pondered what to do next. He decided to continue driving without stopping. However, during the night, the car broke down in the middle of the road. Will was utterly frustrated with the car. In a fit of anger, he poured gasoline on the car, with Tom's body still inside, and set it on fire. This was Will's way of bidding farewell to Tom. The next morning, Will continued his journey on foot. Some people in cars drove past him, ignoring him, but finally a car stopped and a family inside offered him a ride. However, the driver stated that before he would drive, Will needed to hand over his gun. During the journey, they received no radio signals. A little later, they arrived at Will's father's house. There, Will told the family that they could take whatever they wanted from the house if they gave him their car in return. They agreed to the deal, and as they left, Will retrieved his gun. With the car, he soon reached his devastated city, Seattle. The narrative now returned to its starting point. Upon seeing the address Samantha had written in his apartment, Will immediately headed towards it. As he arrived, a man named Jeremiah pointed a gun at him, demanding to know who he was and what he wanted. However, Samantha intervened, stopping Jeremiah, and rushed to meet Will. After things settled down slightly, Will informed Samantha about her father. Will also expressed that if it weren't for Tom, he might not have made it there. That night, Will suddenly awoke. He went outside and saw Samantha and Jeremiah sitting by a fire, so he joined them. It was suggested that the events were caused by a massive earthquake. The police had even issued warnings for everyone to evacuate the city. However, Jeremiah stated he didn't believe it was an earthquake, asserting that another country must have dropped a nuclear bomb on them. Things happened so quickly that no one fully understood, but Will didn't find Jeremiah's theory convincing, reasoning that if it were true, he, having come from the city, would already be dead from radiation. Additionally, Jeremiah repeatedly asked Will for his gun, simply to examine it, which Will found quite odd. Samantha also agreed with Will. In any case, after being separated for so long, they shared a tender moment as soon as they had some time alone. But then Will suddenly sensed someone tampering with his car. It was Jeremiah. The next day, when Will questioned him about it, Jeremiah claimed he was chasing two children away from there, stating they had run towards the forest and that their camp would be there if Will didn't believe him. However, in the forest, they found nothing but but deer. Will realized something was wrong with Jeremiah and firmly stated that he was taking Samantha with him from there, asking if Jeremiah would join them. To this, Jeremiah replied that Samantha was not going anywhere. He turned towards Will, pointing his gun, but Will fired first and killed him. Just then, a dangerous black cloud rapidly approached them. Will quickly called Samantha, and they both got into the car and drove away. They were driving at full speed with a sandstorm pursuing them. This is where the film concludes. One can only hope they survived. If you liked the video, give it a like, subscribe to the channel. See you in the next video.